Today we're here in Newmanstown, Pennsylvania at the Mill Creek Memorial Cemetery at Elias Church. There are two famous ladies that are buried in this cemetery, and you wouldn't know it by the last name of Yeiser. They were extraordinary vaudeville act performers that became internationally famous, not only in the United States, but really much more so in Europe, in England. So let's talk about these ladies further. So the eldest of the Yeiser sisters was Helen, and she actually got her start pretty early. The talent of both sisters most likely came from her father, John, who had been a proprietor of the Rising Sun Hotel and was an expert on the violin and appeared in minstrel shows when he was younger. His wife, Catherine, also had a sweet soprano voice, which this totally explains their love of music. She went to Albright College where she studied music and elocution. From there, she went to New York, where she was for 6 years giving drawing room entertainments to the 400, which was basically the most prominent families in the city. She then appeared in vaudeville on the Keith circuit, playing the piano and singing. Now, in 1906, a gentleman was in the audience and thought her voice was so beautiful that he said, "You really need to go to Victor Records and Edison Cylinders and make recordings of your music." So she did, and her debut hit, The Bird on Nellie's Hat, was released in January 1907. She wound up being spotted by an Oswald Stoll who engaged her for 10 weeks in London. She went to Europe with her elder sister Alma as escort in 1908 and was so successful there she was given a 3-year engagement. She played in most of the large houses in England, Scotland, and Ireland, and entertained nobility, including Prince Francis of Teck, who was the brother of Queen Mary. During this period, Helen made a trip to South Africa for another 8-week engagement in Johannesburg. Eventually, they came back to America in 1912 and spent some time home before returning to New York. And for the next couple years, she continued to play in vaudeville with a tour and that went through the western states on the Orperium circuit, and later an appearance at the prestigious Hammerstein's Victoria Theater in December 1914. She finally got her big break, which to this point seemed like she was quite successful. But she got a bigger break in 1916 when she entered Edward F. Temple's revue called The Bull Ring. And this was apparently quite the show. Basically was very prestigious, and it just, a lot of people thought it was overreaching because of the amount of acts that they had and everything, because it was normal to have maybe 3 or 4 acts in most revues, but for this vaudeville act I think they had like 12 or something like that. It was massive, but that's where she really got, for the first time, got viewed the most. And this is where her career took the next leap forward. And this is where she went from being a single act to recognizing the talent of her 14-year-old younger sister. So the younger sister, Josephine, she wound out being seen by her sister Helen when she came back to Newmanstown and realized her talent was extraordinary, and sort of encouraged her sister to come join her in New York. So Josephine went up there and she performed in 1916 in a charity act with her sister Ellen, and they were both offered attempting terms to perform as a double act. Now, before she did that, she went under the tutelage of her older sister. She learned the rudiments of stage art. She also started taking singing and dancing instruction from, I'm not even going to try to say her name, but she was a Belgian dancer that appeared in the Metropolitan Opera House at that time. And she also got dancing instructions from an Italian master. So their act would compose of singing, dancing, chatter, and piano playing, and they toured for several seasons throughout the Keith circuit in the United States and Canada. So in 1920, they received an offer from C.B. Cochran, one of England's leading theater producers, to appear in his new revue at the New Oxford Theatre. They left for England. Now, there's a thing called the League of Nations, sort of a play off the League of Nations, because this is shortly after World War I, and it was used as a vehicle for American dancers, the Dolly Sisters, and also featured the comedian Burl Coote. He had brought a number of these dancers and performers from vaudeville over to England, where the cabaret was very, very popular. And this is where they truly became famous. They had quite a bit of fame in England, but it was primarily where they really, really got famous was over in England and Paris. And, continuing through quite a few years, they just went through different reviews with this guy, and each one became more and more popular. They performed for royalty, and Helen was already sort of a known commodity, if you will, and they just continued to do really, really well. And then eventually, at some point, they started to have issues with, because of the difference in age. I had said before there was 14 years in difference. They started the rumor that Josephine was actually Helen's daughter, and so they refuted that, which was not true. They were sisters. And then shortly thereafter, their mother passed away, and they were pretty distraught. Josephine wound up marrying another entertainer on the circus, Edward Greenfield, and had a child shortly thereafter, and it sort of broke up the act, which Helen was quite upset about. And at that stage, vaudeville, even in Europe, it stayed a little bit longer, but that was starting to fall out of favor. And Helen just didn't adapt, and Josephine wanted a family. And Helen had previously been married for a short while and was at this point divorced. So there was a little bit of an estrangement there. Eventually, Josephine went back to singing and had quite a bit of success as a single act. And Helen sort of came back to her and said, "Hey, I'd really like to start the Trix Sisters up again," and Josephine agreed. And they had a little bit of success, but it was just the same thing that they had done before, just wasn't in fashion anymore. Eventually, Helen passed away in 1951, and Josephine continued singing to a degree, but that part of her life was over at that stage, and she lived, I believe, till 1992. And passed away in New Orleans, whereas Helen passed away in New York City. But both of them were brought back to the Yeiser family plot and are buried there. The legacy of these women cannot be understated. What they did at that age was phenomenal. And to be two ladies from this small town of Newmanstown, our local hometown history, is really, really cool. It just sort of happened to come upon this and find a grave. I was going through cemeteries looking for famous people and that type of stuff, and found these two women, and I had never heard of them before, but they were enormously successful. And it was sort of sad, with Helen. Once again, you had that age difference of 14 years, so she was out there in the world in vaudeville and entertainment quite a lot longer than her sister was, so the experience levels were completely different. And it was a shame because she was so talented, but yet didn't have the ability to adapt or to ascertain what she needed to do to change her act to continue to find that same success. And it's sort of to Hollywood and the music industry, it's like, that's a pretty cruel world, especially for women. Especially back then. Once you reached a certain age, you were sort of forgotten, and like everything that you had done for the industry was just like, and her sister did everything that she could in that regard to try to continue to work with her, but it was what it was. But it's so cool that these two ladies, what they did, their legacy that they left, and they're well worth noting and remembering. So I want to say thank you as always for coming along and learning about these extraordinary ladies. And as always, we'll see you all about town.
Hey, I just want to say thank you for watching the video. If you could please like and subscribe. If you haven't already done so, that would be great. And we also have a Facebook page. We have an Instagram page. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a Patreon. There are ways of contacting us at thehometownhistorian@gmail.com, and also via mail at P.O. Box 143, Annville, Pennsylvania 17003. All that information is on the descriptions of each video and also in the about for the channel. So thank you once again, and we'll see you all about town.